Hey everyone, welcome to the Warehouse Underground podcast. I'm Ben, your host, and I have a very cool guest on today's show. Her name is Kasey McCormick Lyding, and she is the creator of ManagerStreet. Now, ManagerStreet serves a very niche clientele, and that is first-time managers or junior managers. And so I thought it would be really cool to bring her onto the show because in the distribution industry, we see this all the time. Hourly employees who are promoted to a lead or a supervisor for the very first time, or brand new managers into the industry in general. Sometimes it works out very well, other times not so much, but there's always good lessons learned from that. And so I'm really excited to bring her on the show today and chat with her about all things managers and leadership of people. All right. So with that, I will bring her on. Kasey, thank you very much for coming on to the show. Welcome. And how are you?
Good. Very good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Awesome. So full disclosure, like just so that the audience is aware, you and I do not have the same type of background. So I certainly don't have a background in your industry and you don't have a background in warehousing and distribution. But after we were talking with each other, we started to realize that maybe there's some overlap there, like maybe it doesn't matter. So why don't you just tell the audience a little bit about you, who you are, your background, and what led you to ManagerStreet?
Yeah, definitely. I'm Kasey. Hello, everybody. So I founded ManagerStreet a couple months back. So it's definitely a new business that I'm excited to be getting off the ground. When it comes to me and why I wanted to start a business that focuses on first-time managers, I'll get into my background a little bit. I come from the tech world, so definitely, a different world than Ben. And the specific corner of tech that I was in was having to do with media and advertising related technology. So I was in that world for many, many years. And something that I noticed, and a little background about, maybe more of the corner that I was in, I was always on the operations side and always on the training side, right? So operations, think, my brain loves repeatable process and training. My brain loves helping people get comfortable with whatever it is that they're learning to do that's going to help them do well in their job. And so for me, as I was coming up in that space and I had my first people manager opportunity, the part of me that is used to training and is used to repeatable process was a little bit surprised that in my particular experience, it was more of a, jump in, here you go, take your opportunity and run with it. Which on one way of looking at things can be a great thing, right? Because people, they're going to push themselves forward. They're going to figure it out as they go. But on the other hand, there's so much to learn, and dependent on what industry you're in, there's so much at risk if somebody doesn't really feel comfortable or confident in what they're doing. And so at the time that I went through it, it didn't necessarily sit with me as like a good thing or a bad thing, but I noticed it. I was like, this is so interesting that we give training in our role to other people navigating a career transition or navigating a software transition. But it's not standard to have that as a people manager going through a transition. So I noticed that. And then, you start talking to friends, family, different people who are going through that experience cross industry, right? And the differentiating factor was kind of like, are you at a big company? Then maybe you're going to get some training. If you're at a medium company or a small company, you probably get nothing, right? Yep. And so I'm hearing this theme again and again. Life goes on. I get more comfortable in my role. I grow in my role. And I hit that point of managing a team where it's like, hey, I think this is going well. My team is thriving. And the people individually on the team are thriving. They're excited. They're excited to come to work. They're excited to contribute. All the milestones that we need to reach, or all the goals that we have, we're hitting them and we're knocking them out of the park. And it's like, that is such a good feeling. I would wish for everybody to have that feeling. And wouldn't it be great if there was more in place to help people get there faster and to get there with more confidence? And so that's really the mission of the business. Like I said, I started over the summer, and the idea is to just make this type of training more accessible for people, whether they seek it out themselves or whether a company engages with me and we kind of put something on formal for the people involved and we customize it to the industry. So that's the company and that's what I do.
Yeah, that's really cool that that you bring that up, where you mentioned just kind of getting thrown into the deep end and hey, it's sink or swim, because like we see that in the warehousing and distribution center industry too. But a lot of times the folks there feel like it's unique to them, either unique in their site or definitely unique to the industry. And so to have somebody like you who is not even close to being connected with that industry say, nope, the same problems are happening here. They're universal, the same needs. Like that's a really cool thing to have. I mean, for people to know about, to know that, I don't want to say that they're not alone, but to know that they're not alone, I think is a good thing. So, but in your opinion though, I mean, what do you think is the reason why that is? I mean, why does leadership, because it's obviously very critical, why does it get overlooked? I mean, do you think it's why does training get overlooked of new managers? Do you think it is a resources issue, a financial issue? Do you think people just forget what it was like? Like, what do you think is the driver behind the overlooking of such an important piece of development?
Yeah, I don't think in most cases it's a financial issue. Maybe in some, maybe. But I think that what is the most likely to me is that if somebody is going to get promoted, right, their boss or the person who's about to become their boss is taking a bet on them and recognize them as being a high performer, right? Like you don't really get promoted unless you're really good at whatever it was you're doing. So they're used to seeing you be good at what you're doing. They're used to seeing you, outpace your peers maybe a little bit. They're used to seeing you figure out the answers. So I think that, I want to give the benefit of the doubt. I don't think anybody's intentionally setting people up to fail, but I think that maybe it's not thought of because of the skills that you brought in. The problem is those skills don't necessarily make for an easy people manager transition. Those skills can be totally separate. And then people end up learning as they go, and there can be some risk, maybe yes, maybe no, depending on the situation. I also think that if we look at leadership just as a general concept, and it's so kind of in the conversation these days, a lot of times people previously might have come up in more of a hierarchical structure, right? And in today's workplace, even when there's hierarchy in place, and hierarchy is important, right? But hierarchy alone does not garner respect these days. And maybe it shouldn't, right? Like maybe we should earn respect based on who we are, what we bring to the table, how we help and grow others. Like those things are worthy of respect, not necessarily like notches on an org chart. And so I think that maybe folks in the past had a little bit of an easier time with that transition. And I think that more is asked of people who are managing people these days. And I think that's a good thing. I just think that that means that you need a little more thought and care put into that transition.
Yeah. And I think, like I've told my managers over the years that a lot, that you have to manage in the environment and in the culture with the demographic of the people that you're managing. You have to manage in your time with that staff. So one way of managing that worked in the 80s or the 90s or even the 2000s is no longer going to work. And if you're that manager that is just stuck in the mud and this is my way, well, you're going to quickly not be a manager anymore. Like you need to adjust to the people that you're managing. That's why it's called management. And so what are the other skills? I mean, what are the other types of traits or skills when you come across junior managers? What are the things that you see they need the most development in, or the most guidance in, or the most resources to help support? What are those specific manager characteristics that they need the most of?
Yeah, I think a couple come to mind right away. I think I would probably put in the number one slot motivating, right? How do you
Oh yeah.
motivate a team towards a goal? And I think, again, for folks who might be recently promoted, you obviously were good at what you were doing to get promoted. You probably had a lot of internal motivation, and that was a habit, right? And so then when you start leading a team, internal motivation is not going to draw anybody towards the outcome that you necessarily want. You might luck out and you might have internally motivated folks, but much better to externally motivate, right? And to kind of be that force drawing things forward in the right direction. And so that idea of switching from motivating oneself to motivating a group, I think that is something that gets overlooked a lot of times in favor of a feeling of smoothness, right? At the
Yeah.
beginning, it might feel like you're doing a good job because things are smooth. And smooth
Yep.
is better than chaotic, but smooth
Yeah.
is not necessarily leadership either. So,
Yeah.
so I would say motivating a group is probably what I put in that number one spot.
Yeah, I see that. I've seen that in my career where it's somebody who gets into a new role and they're now in a position where they are leading what were their peers
Mhm.
potentially. Like now they're managing them or now they're leading them. And I think just making that mental transition sometimes is difficult for people, right? Because
Yeah.
they're used to, I want these people to be my friends and I want to get along with them and I want to be all lovey-dovey, but that isn't necessarily the task of a manager, right? A manager should be moving the ball forward for their shift or their operation. They should be developing their folks. They should be making sure that things are getting better for the long term, all those things. And that doesn't really include just being people's friends. And in fact, I've seen in some cases, maybe you've seen this too, that the people that can never break free of that they're always wanting to be people's friends, really get some real headwind very early in their management career. So I know me, like when I look back on my on my career, like everybody does this, you look back to how you were 10 years ago or 15 years ago or whatever. I sometimes just like cringe at some of the things that I did or said when I was a brand new manager because I was just so green. Like I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was very motivated. And I just said and did some things that made it very difficult for my boss at the time to push me forward and vouch for me. But have you ever ran into that? I mean, you're very seasoned as a manager now, but when you look back on your career on time, do you see instances where you're like, oh my goodness, like that was just cringeworthy. I can't believe I did that. Have you ever done that? Do you ever go through that drill, or are you much easier on yourself than I am for my part?
Oh no, I am with you. I am with you. And I feel like for myself, if I look back at all stages of my career, to be honest, I think I was a person that had to learn things the hard way, depending on what the situation was. And it, doesn't have to be like that, but I do think that's a universal experience. And something that comes to mind that I definitely had to learn the hard way. Is not to solution problems so quickly, right? Because I wanted to have the answer. And I think as a
Yes,
manager, people
absolutely.
might bump into a challenge and they bring it to you. And by the way, you want them to bring it to you, especially as you're building trust with them, right? Like you want to be brought into those problems. But then for me, at least, I wanted to just give the answer right away.
Yep.
And they were the closest to the problem, right? They were the ones experiencing it. I would have been much better served to slow down and
Yep.
to listen
Yeah.
and to ask a lot of clarifying questions, at least three, right? Ask at least three clarifying questions, whatever they might be, right? If we don't take care of this right now, who's impacted, right? What's the urgency level? Is there anything else I should know before we try to start solving this problem, right? Just ask some clarifying questions. And then again, you might want to give that answer. But then ask the person, okay, what would you like us to do next here? Or
Yeah.
what would your recommendation be of how to handle it? You might go with that solution, you might not, depends on what they say, right? But that is so much better than just leaping to solving the problem. And I was so guilty of that. And so, I would always rather have a better solution. And so once I started looking at it that way, I'm going to source that from the person who's in it much better than from myself, not knowing all the details yet. And so that's one where I just kind of cringe and think, oh, I wish I had had that approach from the start. And so at least I learned it, right? But it would have been nicer to know that one sooner.
Yeah. And I mean, that is a skill. I mean, that is knowledge and wisdom that you really only get over time, or you get if you have very good mentors or some type of training or some type of education that allows you to have that. Because it's not always natural for people. It's certainly not people that were top performers as like a solo contributor. Their inclination is always going to be jump in and do it on your own. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've walked out onto the warehouse floor. You see a new leader or a new supervisor, and they're literally the one doing all the work, and everyone is kind of just like around them, watching them do it. And I'm like, that's not managing. You're not managing, like you are working. This is not how it's supposed to go. So absolutely, like pulling people back and be like, hey, you've got to build consensus. You've got to get inputs from all the team member. Like you've got to have a group solution to this is not always natural for people. Like what's the proverb? They say the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. I think that really applies to management too. So
I love that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think I really butchered that quote. So I'm not going to go back and edit this. It's raw, just like the Warehouse Underground, but you know what I mean.
We got the gist of it. Yes.
Yeah. So let me ask this question. Now, one of the things that I have seen, and you probably have as well, is I'm a brand new manager, or I'm a brand new supervisor. I'm a brand new leader in my organization. And right away, when I get put in that role, I start to feel like I'm in over my head. Like I'm not feeling ready. 9 times out of 10, they will not raise their hand and go to their boss or their supervisor and say, I need more training, or I need more help, or I need more whatever, because for various reasons, that's going to make me look bad. It's going to make it look like I don't know what I'm doing, and that's why they put me in this role. So I'm very insecure about that. But I look at a resource like ManagerStreet, like what you provide out there, and I'm like, this is perfect for people that are like that. And most people are like that. You don't even have to have that moment where you go to your manager and you raise your hand and say, I need help. Like you can get the help from someplace else, and it's called ManagerStreet, right? And so I think in today's day and age, with people like you and opportunities and resources like yours and what you provide, it's a golden era for first-time managers to use that as a resource, because they're going to get all of the benefit of your wisdom, all the scars that you might have in like half the time, or way faster than half the time. So do you agree with that? I mean, do you see things along that same way, that resources like ManagerStreet is, I don't want to use a bad term, almost like a cheat code a little bit that people can use to accelerate their career?
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for saying it and for seeing it that way. For anybody who's starting a new business, you have this idea of what you want to bring to people, and you hope that people see it the same way. So I appreciate you saying all of that. I think that when it comes to having more responsibility given to you at work, you want to do a good job. And even if, the wanting to do a good job part is not enough, it's tied to your livelihood, right? It's tied to your paycheck. You want to make sure that it goes smoothly. And the way that it tends to work in many companies, not all, because some companies do offer training, but for the ones that don't, the dynamic that's set up is that your primary coach through that process is typically your boss. So that's the person who's responsible for doing your performance review. That's the person that holds kind of that entry point, that doorway to new opportunities for you down the road as you further grow your career. And it might feel very uncomfortable to be going to that person with all of your challenges. And there's so many wonderful bosses out there that want to mentor, that want to coach, and people just don't go to them. So that's kind of one challenge. And I understand why people might not feel comfortable. There's also situations where, maybe the boss is just so overloaded. They've got multiple people that they're managing, multiple teams that report into them. They might have the intention of wanting to help, but they just don't have the true bandwidth to help people. And people who know that don't go to them asking for help. So it just creates this bad cycle that doesn't quite feel logical, right? Like there should be somebody else to go to. Family and friends are also a great option, of course, but they are not necessarily neutral, right? They love you, they care about you. They're going to probably be coming from your side, defending you, maybe not giving you kind of, a true third-party assessment of what's going on. So that's where part of the idea for this company came from, of like, let's offer for the people who want to accelerate that little bit faster, who don't want to be trying out, their new ideas or their pain points. They don't be trying that out in real life. I come from software, right? And so there'll be things like a testing environment or a staging environment where you can try things out in the software before you launch them. Wow. Wouldn't it be nice if there was some program that allowed you to do that with this people manager stuff? So you're not trying it for the first time on a person that's going to look at you, raise their eyebrow, and not take you seriously. So, the problem is certainly there. But yeah, the idea of seeking some specific specialized help for a transition, I think, is just something that even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, like didn't really exist. So I'm excited to be part of, the democratization of all of this knowledge that people have. And I'll add to, I feel like I have insights to offer, and I have, a lot that I can bring to helping somebody through that transition. But part of what a ManagerStreet program contains is like a cohort style structure. So you also are kind of crowdsourcing answers, and especially because people have different styles, hearing from what other people who are at the same point of their transition are bumping into. So that's part of the idea as well, is that I can help. I can assist you in getting that transition faster, but I can also facilitate and draw out answers from others, because diverse perspectives are fantastic, and sometimes we get to even better ideas. So let's tackle this as a group, going through it together.
Yeah, no, I think it's awesome. I mean, I think it's a fantastic resource that's out there for anybody who wants to take advantage of it. And yeah, I mean, it's a faster way up to the front in terms of development. And you're crazy if you don't take advantage of things like that in today's day and age, I think, no matter what it is. So let me ask you this. I'm a person, or I'm a company, right? Because I know you work with companies too, or want to work with companies too. So I'm a person, or I'm a company, and I want to utilize you and ManagerStreet as a resource. Maybe I have a whole group of people I want to develop, or maybe I just want personal development. Talk us through what it looks like once somebody decides to work with you. Like, what can they expect? What are the nuts and bolts? How does it feel? How does it taste? What's the ins and outs of everything that they can expect once they sign on?
Yeah, definitely. I'll give you the whole experience. So I'll start with the company side, because there's kind of some different categories within that as well. So let's say you're a company that has not necessarily offered this type of training to folks that you promote or first-time managers before, and you want something that's more specialized than just kind of like generic leadership or generic management, where you're going to group people together with higher level folks who've been doing it for years. You want something specific and targeted for folks that are going through that transition for the first time. I've got kind of a base model that's laid out that has the recommended topics that any new manager cross industry is going to need to build expertise in. So some of those would be things like how to motivate a group, how to delegate is huge, how to have a tough conversation and still get the outcome that you want, right? You don't want to have a tough conversation and have the person in that conversation with you kind of shut down and stop contributing, right? We want to motivate people towards wanting to bring their best. So those are just kind of standard things that I think cross industry, I would say, this would make the list, and I would recommend that you include these as topics. But there's also some customization, and that's something that as a small company, somebody that is starting out, I welcome that customization. I feel like that's part of, what I can bring to the table and do different than other programs that might be out there is, let's say you're a remote only company. Well, I can kind of choose from a library of topics and say, okay, let's cover leading in a remote environment. Or you're an all on-site company. Let's kind of pull from those topics and cover, leading in person, right? Leading where you can't really step away and maybe have some privacy in between those tough conversations, whatever the case might be. Other things that are on that customization front is, let's say there's a particular topic that's important to you. Let's say the CEO of your company was, interviewed in Forbes, make up whatever particular piece of media or book that somebody has written, anything like that. If you want that covered as part of the curriculum, we're going to cover that. I'm a one-person operation, and I'm happy to customize to make sure that we're hitting the points that are relevant to your business. So that's what it would be like if I'm working with a business and expecting to have a group of, multiple people come through the program. The other scenario is, let's say your startup, your small company, you have one promotion. You don't need to put on a whole program for multiple people. You've got one person. You can sponsor them to come through a ManagerStreet cohort that I am going to be running periodically. I've got my first one coming up on December 14th is when it starts. Awesome. So you can just enroll somebody and I will take them through the basics and the things that I feel are the most universal. And then the last category is an individual who says, I would like to seek this kind of help, this kind of coaching through my transition, but I don't necessarily want my company to be a part of it, right? We all are in different work environments, and some places are not so friendly to raising one's hand and asking for help. And so if somebody wanted to enroll themselves, that's also an option. I'm going to make sure as I go forward that I have a blend of weekend cohorts going as well as weekday cohorts going, so it can kind of suit multiple schedules.
Very cool.
And in that case, you go through the program as well, whether it's you paying for it or your company paying for it. And then once it gets going, I've got my session topics and I've got my outside materials that I bring in, and I use a lot of studies and research that are done by folks who make this their academic pursuit to study all of this leadership stuff. But then there's also a lot of group discussion and a lot of facilitation, and let's hear what Ben is bumping into. And you know what? Maybe Kasey's style is not Ben's style, but Johnny over here has a pretty similar style to Ben. Johnny, have you bumped into this? So there's a lot of that kind of group interaction. And I think it really helps to be going through it with folks together. So that's a multiple point answer to your question.
Yeah, I mean, there's just one. Thank you very much for coming on the show. I mean, it's been great to talk about this stuff, and it's just like so much overlap. I know you and I have talked about this before, kind of before the show, and it's true. I mean, there's just so much overlap there. I mean, people are people, right? Like leadership is leadership, management is management. And it doesn't necessarily really matter if you're tech or you're from a distribution center. A lot of the things like roll over. And so I'm glad we had a chance to really do this cool collaboration. I mean, I thought it was really good, and I'm excited to kind of post this and have everyone see, because it's really a lot of good stuff. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, guys, that concludes today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in to the Underground Podcast. If you have not already signed up for the community, please do that. And with that, we'll see you next time.